Welcome everyone to the Draft Crush Panthers on Tap combo collab podcast show. I'm Edgar Salmingo Jr., joined always by Ricky. Ricky Rains. Ricky, how are you?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. We got a special guest today. I feel like we're gonna be taking to school because for those that don't know this person, this is actually the second year we've been alive for 2 years. This is the second time we were bringing him on, but just the amount of detail, the amount of nuance to every bit of his evaluations, like it's just I'm taking to school, and so I'm just very thankful that we have a special guest today. But Ricky, we're only 10 days away from the draft, and you know, it's very likely. It's been a buzz. It's been something that Dave Canales said that they're looking for weapons for Bryce Young, and so
Yeah.
why not bring in somebody who knows the most, who's done the most work, the most detail on the weapons in this class, and also the weapons that we've already drafted. But Ricky, is there anything else you wanted to say about our next guest?
No, that's a good headliner right there to bring in. This guy, this is Matt Waldman, is our guest. We're gonna go ahead and bring him to the stage. There is Matt. First of all, thank you very much, man, for being on today with us. Not to try to make you feel any more uncomfortable while we dote on you before we get started talking about football players. But Matt is basically the reason why I felt like I had any gumption to start doing evaluations of my own, because Matt is a self-taught, at least at the beginning, right? Self motivated evaluator, and he has been doing the rookie scouting portfolio now. Matt, how many years have you done the rookie scouting portfolio?
This is year 21.
Year 21.
Yeah.
That is insane. 21 years. The rookie scouting portfolio is used for fantasy players. The rookie scouting portfolio is used for regular football nerds like me and Edgar. And then teams value your evaluations. They value your process. It is the same process. It is a uniform process. It is meticulous. It is film driven. It is not pretty and colorful and bright pictures in the guide. It is statistics. It is numbers. It is facts. And it is what I appreciate very much about it. And Matt, I'm very excited to get your opinion on what the Carolina Panthers could be looking at, whether it's with pick 19 or whether it is, second, third, and find value later in this draft. You have evaluated a ton of prospects, so I'm ready to get into it. And as always, if you have not downloaded the rookie scouting portfolio, go to mattwaldman.com. It is available right now. Purchase it, and then you get the post-draft RSB as well. So that is a little bit more of the team-specific fits for these prospects as they go places. Matt, did we miss anything that you want to touch on first?
No, I mean, that's great. Other than, y'all have the best walk-up music to begin your episodes of any podcast I have ever done. And I love the video along with it too. That in itself is awesome. But no, I mean, it's it is definitely one of those draft guides that I have. A lot of people that I've learned from and worked from have been running back coaches, wide receiver coaches, to the pros, to pro players. And a lot of what you'll see with my process has these techniques and skills baked into it. And then the process that I derived from it is really from best practices. If you've heard of ISO, if you've worked in corporate America and you've seen like standard operation procedures, things like that, I learned that for a different type of company way back in the day. It wasn't ISO, but it's similar to that. And I basically took world-class processes in evaluating and performance and transferred that to evaluating players. And then and the process is about building on itself so that you get better and better and better at it. And so as I learn more about the game and the players that I'm studying, and the positions that I'm studying, the process got even better because it was built to get better. And that's really made a big difference in terms of the outcome of what I do here, because it's my full-time gig.
And you've made a few adjustments recently, right? With a couple of the positions. I noticed a couple of different things in the RSP this year.
Yeah, for tight end, mainly because when you look at the tight ends, you're always trying to. I'm probably going to be updating my running backs as well this coming year. But there's things that it's a continuous improvement type of that's part of the mantra of what you try and do with a process like this. And usually I'm cautious about just thinking I'm improving something right away. I usually take notes for years about things that I want to do and kind of test that in the background before I publish anything or roll with it. But, this year with tight end, it made sense over the years that, I focused mostly on giving the highest value to move tight ends, guys who I call oversized wide receivers.
Yeah.
The route running is just as important as their ability to catch, and even more important than their blocking skill, because blocking, they have a place for it, but it's not as elevated as an inline tight end, where I call them oversized fullbacks. And basically you look at Tucker Kraft, Tyler Warren, AJ Barner, plays like that, where it's basically they're there to block and catch, meaning that, as JJ Watt said about Tyler Warren when he interviewed him, he was like, dude, what does it feel like to catch a football and have nobody within 15 yards of you and you just can rumble? That's the design of the offense, was to do that. And then, the same thing with Tucker Kraft. I mean, yeah, those guys can do a little more than that, maybe even a lot more, depending on, the player that we're going to talk about, we would talk about there. But so now I didn't change how I look at players, because I still look at them in great depth always. I just changed how I scored the value for some of these things. So it makes it easy, because if you're looking at the right things, then you just go, okay, well, now receiving is going to be equal to catching the football, but route running is going to be half the value if I'm looking at a Tucker Kraft, Tyler Warren type of fit with the teams that they're in. But if I'm looking at someone who's more of a move tight end, a Brock Bowers, then I'm thinking, well, yeah, they're going to have to beat guys one-on-one and be as good as the first two receivers or better who would normally be on the field in order to have that kind of value. So I'm valuing that more. So now I offer two different scores so you can kind of understand pre-draft. All right, my team needs an inline tight end. What's that score? My team needs a move tight end. What's that score?
I love it. I nerded out when I saw that you broke it down that way, because I struggle with that, Matt. Like when I do evaluations with things, and even with wide receivers, I fall into that sometimes, because there are wide receivers that are such prolific blockers and have a little bit more to them as the insert type players that are being, kind of focused on in today's NFL offenses. It's such an important part of that position. But then I have these players that I fall in love with because they're incredible at one thing, right? Like they're so good at being fast and getting over the top of the defense and making beautiful catches that, like, I'm like, am I just valuing that too much? So when you get to break it down on a tight end level like that and say, hey, look, there's two different archetypes, right? There's two different focus. There's objectives of these different kinds of players. I appreciated that very much, because it helped me, man. Like I was already in the weeds doing my thing, and then all of a sudden I read your RSP and I was like, damn it, I might have to like go back and look at this again, because this is all making way better sense when it's just really you break it down in a common sense way. And I appreciate that very much about it. Edgar, should we ask him about our current rookie of the year on the Panthers before we get into the upcoming?
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to talk about, some of the, maybe not to brag, the offensive rookie of the year.
Brag harder, Edgar. More.
But before we get there, Matt, we talked about it, but if people want to check out, want to purchase, want to see your work, where should we point them to?
Yeah, mattwaldman.com is the easiest place to go. I do two different types of services. One is the RSP pre-draft, post-draft guide, and that's where you get two guides, one right now, one within a week after the draft. If you're looking for like scouting reports and rookie and preparing in fantasy football for rookie only drafts, this is the guide you want to get for sure. If you're a dynasty player who wants to do, who just wants to see projections and frequent updates to rankings, like for all players with little like explanation for why I rank them, just some commentary. You can get that. Also, it's the dynasty rankings and projection service. Most people get both because they're like, for $50 essentially, I'm getting something that's worth about 100. And most people are telling, tell me that when they buy the RSP. They're like, I would have paid double for this. So that's where you can go, mattwaldman.com.
Easily. And then some of the proceeds. Can we talk about where some of the proceeds go?
Sure. For, we've given over $70,000 to Darkness to Light. There's an organization out of the Carolinas, out of South Carolina, that is devoted to preventing sexual abuse of children through educational programs. They've worked with, government programs, universities, individuals for many years to train people on how to spot behaviors of grooming that could lead to abuse, dynamics that don't really work well, that to avoid kids from being abused, and then also to help companies understand and individuals understand how to deal with it when it is reported, so that they don't compound the trauma of it. And they've worked with after the fact, like Penn State and Michigan State, with what happened there to help them prevent that from happening again. So it's a great organization. We've been donating. This will probably be the last year I'm donating to it, mainly because they're great and I love what they've done. But there are some other projects that I would like to donate to, and I have one that's also near and dear to me that I would like to start donating to. So we figure we'll be close to 80 grand probably by the time that we've donated to them since 2012, around the time the Penn State scandal happened. And we feel like that's that's great, and maybe we'll revisit it someday. But there's one other group that I would like to donate to, so we'll do that.
That's great, man.
Appreciate thanks, Matt. I mean, not like you needed more reasons to support Matt. You're a great person.
Yeah.
But I feel like the cost per page has got to be one of the best value in the business, right, Matt? Like
I mean, it is. Hey, look, man. I laugh. I mean, usually I joke the extreme version of becoming a lifetime subscriber is you think I'm an idiot at first because I'll give something that's a little bit outlier like in terms of how I view things, and then whether it's Marvin Harrison has some catching problems, and that we should be a little concerned about that. He's still a very good player, but he might not start off as hot as you think he will. And they'll go, oh, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. And then they start following the podcast. And then they go, maybe I should check out this thing. They wait a year or two. They buy it. And then they write me and go, this thing is insane. I thought you were exaggerating. You're just trying to sell me. It's better than what you said. I'm so shocked by this thing. I'm a lifetime subscriber. And then they write me and go, you really should charge twice as much. And I get these emails all the time. So I'm really proud of that. It's a low on frills, high on substance kind of thing. That's kind of like I create my own analytics because of how I study film. So you get an interesting look. Like I do contact balance breakdowns and things like that, where unlike some services at Grade where you could slap a thigh pad on a runner and they get 75 yards and you go, look at that great contact balance. And then you see a runner who gets hit in the chest by a defensive tackle and gains 4 yards anyway. I mean, come on, common sense, like you said, which one is actually a display of power? And let's break down the different types of tackles, maybe, instead of just say all tackles are equal. So things like that are things that I do in terms of charting, and you get to see the entire process. And that's what I think makes the difference, is so that you can see and go, all right, some of his outliers are really outliers. And we're going to, there's a player I really like this year at running back by the name of Miles Montgomery. He probably won't get drafted. I'm going to tell you, he probably won't get drafted. And that means his chances of being a high-end player aren't that strong. But I once liked this player out of Asheville who I thought was one of the better running backs in his class. And then a wide receiver out of Stanford who I thought was like Michael Thomas in terms of how he played. But he had to learn to catch the ball a little bit better, and he was working on it and seemed like he was on the right track the way he described what he was trying to do. And it took 4 years for these guys, 4 or 5 years for these guys to actually hit, but they were Rico Dowdle and Michael Thomas last year. So the good thing is that with the pre-draft, I don't have to worry about character. I don't have to worry about calling up teams and wondering where they think they're going to pick them. And while that's valuable for the NFL draftniks who do that, I don't have those resources. So why am I going to pretend to be Daniel Jeremiah? Why am I going to pretend to be something I'm not? I'm going to study the hell out of what they do on the field. And then I can do the post draft and say, now we know draft capital, and we know draft capital mimics how teams really want to invest in giving those players opportunities to compete and which ones they don't. And as a result of that, now I can factor that in, and I don't have to skimp on the talent part. So if I say Kyle Mononga is an underrated back, and he's probably going to get an opportunity somewhere to, like, if he gets an opportunity to play, he's going to be good enough to give you production right away. I can say that without worrying about the fact that, oh, he might be a 6th or 7th round pick. Maybe I should lower him in my rankings because I have to do these mock drafts and I have to show what that is. And that's good. It's valuable. It's entertaining, but I don't have to do that. And then I can just focus on the field. So when I say Rico Dowdle's better than you think, and the Cowboys kept dealing with his injuries, but kept him for 4 years, that says something, and it stays true to what you're doing. So that's kind of how my process differs.
And Kyle Mononga, he did impact the game when he got in there, so that was a good call. When I saw Miles Montgomery, I about had a hissy fit. I was like, I didn't watch a single lick of this guy's game. I was like, now I got to go back. He's got him at number. Well, we'll get into where he got him because I won't talk about that. But you had him high up, and it set off the alarms for me. I was like, all right, I don't know what to do. Real quick before we get into these prospects, let's talk chat real fast. We got a bunch of friends in here that are watching already.
Sure.
First of all, appreciate everyone that is here watching. It is noon on a Monday. I just got back in town from spring break. First, Panther Dog wants to tell you, Matt, you should see our W video when the Panthers win. We do a Panthers on Tap show. When they win, we've got this really honky-tonk, chintzy celebration video. It's about 30 seconds long with a great little baseline, funky baseline. So that's the one that we like the most. Katie is in here. Katie, appreciate you being here. She says hi, Matt.
Katie.
Thanks for joining.
Hey, Katie.
Keaton, thanks listening to Ricky and Edgar work. I appreciate that, man. Just don't tell my boss, All right. So we got the chat in here all day. Threes and TDs. What's up? He had a good interview with Jared Feinberg, writer for On SI. Good guy. Interesting episode that was. All right. Edgar, is there anything else you want to touch on before we bring up these slides? And we'll get started with wide receiver, I think, first, because I think that's the order that I had these in.
Yeah. You want to go with T-Mac or you want to go with
Let's
these
go
guys?
T-Mac before we do this. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk T-Mac.
So Matt, like you were, and you actually convinced Ricky when he was doing his evaluations last year, you had a different person as your wide receiver one. And maybe we could also eventually transition to, you always have a good write-up about what rankings are for you in your RSP. So talk to us a little bit about what you saw in T-Mac in your evaluation last year, and then what did you see from him? If you got to see some of his work from this year, can you compare the two, what you saw before the draft and what you saw during his rookie season?
Sure. I study these guys throughout the year when they play in the NFL. A lot of what I look at in the NFL is what informs my process of how I project forward with him. And obviously, T-Mac had a great year. Statistically had a great year, and the way the Panthers used him, I thought, was very successful. And it didn't change how I saw him pre-draft to it. I didn't have him as wide receiver one on my board. I still had him as a startable wide receiver right away. But people look at rankings and they look at the ranks and they go, "Oh, you have him 6th? What on earth is that? You must hate him." And as I always tell people in the chapters of the RSP, rankings suck, okay? But you have to do them. And because if I were with a specific team, there would be certain traits that I value, or certain skills that I value more, or a certain body type, or how the guy's going to be used, or a role. But if I have to rank everybody for no team in particular, then there's great variation with how teams look at the position. So, to me, it's the score that matters. And if you score as an instant starter, that's great, and that's what happened with him. The things that I looked at where he was not wide receiver one is that basically he's a big receiver who didn't show me the ready-made skills to win one-on-one off the line of scrimmage on timing routes against man coverage, against cornerbacks. When you project him against the number one cornerback on a team, I didn't feel like he had the footwork, the timing, the the skills to separate early and maintain that separation to win on timing routes that break back to the quarterback or break inside across the field. And when I watched him, and I watched Carolina a lot, what I saw was Carolina did an excellent job of using him against zone coverage, letting him win one-on-one at the top of the route, which is where he's always been very good, excelled in that area, and then matchups, like watching the Falcons. Good example. I'm in Atlanta or in the Atlanta area, okay? And that game comes on, it's one of the easiest games to watch for me of the season is Carolina, Atlanta. Watch those games. But like when you watch the touchdown that he scored on in Atlanta, it was matched up against the linebacker one-on-one. Okay. When I watched a third down where they needed to get yardage and he had a rare one-on-one against AJ Terrell, the footwork wasn't there. The ability to like earn separation off the line, even against off coverage, but like tight enough, wasn't there. And I've noticed that he had very few opportunities to win man-to-man, and I think that was by design. They knew what they have in him, and they leveraged his strengths. So for me, I look at him and I go, they did a great job working him open. But is he traditionally what you would expect from a wide receiver one? As wide receivers in the NFL would describe to you, a wide receiver one wins off the line of scrimmage against tight man and wins at the top of the route separation-wise against tight man. He does half of that really well. The other half, either he's going to develop that or they're just going to say, you know what? We don't need him to do that. We're going to find someone who can. And to me, that makes him a high-end wide receiver too right now, more in the area of like a Mike Williams, T. Higgins type that people often say, oh, if they give him the ball enough, he's going to be a wide receiver one. Well, he was last year. And as a starter, first year, he had an excellent year. But if I'm going to hold the standard of what you're going to expect 2-3 years down the line, he's not there yet. And that's okay. He may get there, or he may never have to get there, and they will add somebody else to it. So I liked what he did. But when I go on social media and I show film and I talk about things, oftentimes I'll get a response of people who are like, oh, you hate him. And it's like, you know how it is. So it's like, when you don't have as much room for nuance, or people don't want to see the nuance. So, if you see my face again, it might be when you go to the post office in Charlotte or, in outlying areas, you might see it in there as most wanted, but that's okay.
I appreciate though that you can point out and say, look, he had a great year, right? At least statistically, production wise, being the focal point of an offense. I mean, they ran that offense through T-Mac. He was their wide receiver one, but there are still areas that you had in the RSP as notable areas to watch and focus on for improvement to reach his absolute best potential. And you notice that he still wasn't getting past those impediments, if you will, that he still has work to do. He was a rookie. It's 1 year. They still don't have the rest of their offense solidified. You can tell based on these pre-draft visits that they've done so far this offseason, they have an emphasis on certain players that we're going to get into. And I can't wait to hear what you think about that same thing you just said. Even if he doesn't improve on some of those elements of his game, that doesn't mean that he can't be extremely useful and valuable for this offense with some other players that maybe you can bring their skill sets to the forefront.
Yeah. And then just to give you a contrast, I mean, look at who won one-on-one on third and short or third down situations when he was pressed. It was Jalen Coker. Right. Against the Rams in particular, I remember watching a play where he won against press and went deep on them. And those are the plays that T-Mac wasn't put in position to do. And I believe the reason was, if you look at his college film, he had trouble doing it. And then when he was put in a position to do it, it was only like a handful of reps, and it just, he looked like he still needed to acclimate, that's okay.
Yeah. We got all day threes and TDs points out that Ben Solak has said something similar that when he went up against quarterback one and man, he struggled.
Yeah, and Ben's a smart dude. Even if I used to watch him ride in the trunk in Mobile, Alabama before he went to ESPN, I like to joke with him about that.
He does have one of the snazziest backdrops on ESPN. I'll tell you that. He's always got the nice plants behind him and all that stuff. It just looks really nice.
Yeah, look at him. Unlike me with some sort of frisbees that I collect with my dog while we're walking through the woods.
Oh, man. All right, look, we're going to get into this. Bring this to the stage. So I've got, Matt, I did top 5 wide receivers that I have ranked that also have been talked about in relation with the Carolina Panthers. Carnell Tate was a little bit of a godsend for me because yesterday Bucky Brooks dropped his mock draft and actually had Carnell Tate mocked to the Carolina Panthers at 19. So I was like, perfect. Thank you, Bucky, for that. Sometimes life, smiles upon you, and he did yesterday. Carnell Tate is my wide receiver 1. And these rankings that you'll see here, Matt, these are just my specific personal rankings. And I'm glad that when you spoke about the difference between team rankings and then a ranking like you would do, you're doing them on your system, on your grading criteria, and an overall breadth of talent, right? Like that is what yours is about. And mine, in a similar vein, is just my perspective, my grading scale, how I look at them, not how valuable Carnell Tate may be to the Falcons as opposed to the Minnesota Vikings, not as valuable as he could be from other systems, offensive schemes to other ones. This is just my eyes seeing them from a basic criteria of the position, the same fields, how do they grade against each other, just for contrast for them. Carnell Tate is my 1. And Matt, tell us where you have Carnell Tate.
Yeah, easily number 1. Like he's, if Malik Neighbors and who would be another example of some players that were Jamar Chase were guys at the top of what I would call my franchise tier, which is one of the higher tiers that he would be the second highest tier player could have. And no one's really gotten to the highest tier yet with this current iteration. But close. Malik Neighbors and Jamal Chase were very close to getting to that rare tier. Carnell Tate would be at the bottom of that franchise tier, which would still put him higher than like the immediate starter tier where some of the other players are. Carnell Tate to me is the most complete receiver in this class. His ability to win off the line, tell efficient stories as a route runner, to manipulate defenders in off coverage or man coverage is strong. It's ready-made right now for him to win. The speed is not bad, even though much has been made about it. His acceleration is strong. He's a strong route, strong in terms of earning position late at the catch point. He has peerless hands. And what I say about that is that most receivers in the NFL, even when they have to catch a target high or high and away, they clap onto the ball. They don't catch with their fingertips. The meat of their fingers or their palms strike the ball as the ball reaches the point that they're going to intersect with it, rather than the technique that's taught, which is getting your hands already in position to meet the ball as it arrives. And Tate can do this on high and away and high targets. He has excellent body control near the boundary or with the defender on him, makes tough plays. And people say, well, he's just a split end and he doesn't run a big route tree. They haven't seen him run a big route tree enough. And a lot of people look at sample size as a factor for that, rather than looking at the specific techniques that a receiver uses that translate to a full route tree. He can drop his hips. He can run speed turns. He can run drop and pop breaks. He understands how to work back to the ball. So if I've only seen him run, the way you run routes, if you can do all those things once or twice and you don't run a high percentage of curl routes, I don't care. If you run a curl route well and you do it well 2 or 3 times, that's enough. And I watch a lot of tape and chart a lot of tape. So I'm watching way more than 3 or 4 games, but like that's still, if you see somebody do those complex chain of movements correctly, that's not an accident. You can't it's not like you run into the back of of a defender as a running back and then find an open spot, and then everybody gets lost and you break away and you go, well, that was luck. This is different than that. So he does all these things well. But the thing is that people look at, he had 1 year of strong production and they worry about that. But there was Emeka Egbuka, there was Marvin Harrison Jr., there was JSN. They were all there. They were all primary guys. Before that, you had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, though they weren't there when I think Tate was there. But you had some big names. Just because Nick Chubb was working with Sony Michel didn't mean that he wasn't way better than Sony Michel. Okay, as it turned out. Sometimes teams, if something's working, unless Carnell Tate was the next Randy Moss and like 2x better than their best receiver, there's no way they were going to bench a player, because from a recruiting standpoint, that looks awful.
Yeah.
They've got to, so if these guys are playing well and fitting, Tate had to wait his turn. And there's, and sometimes they look at Jeremiah Smith and people get all excited about the flashy deep stuff. That's fine. But here's the thing. The player I compared him to reminds me of a situation down in LSU where, they had Jamar Chase and he took a year off and everybody's like, yeah, he's probably the best receiver if the year off doesn't screw him up, which it didn't. And then the next player they were all about was Terrace Marshall. You guys had Terrace Marshall, and you saw what he was, which was he's big, fast, strong guy who wasn't a complete receiver and kind of sloppy sometimes with things. But everybody was all over Terrace Marshall. They weren't all over the guy who was the third receiver, and that was Justin Jefferson. And Justin Jefferson reminds me a lot of Carnell Tate, or vice versa. They're both good in the air. They both run great routes, and people worry about the after the catch. But Justin Jefferson isn't a demon after the catch, but he's not Torrey Holt either. Okay, so that's where I see Carnell Tate.
Maybe not even reminds you of each other. They might beat each other as far as you're concerned. You said that you wouldn't be surprised if they snuck an Ohio State jersey on Justin Jefferson and let him play on Saturdays.
That was my lead to make it entertaining in the joke. But I think the comparison is closer than people realize.
Yeah, I think that that's a really valuable thing to talk about too. Is that just because a player doesn't do something at a high volume in college doesn't mean that they're not capable of it. When they do show you the examples of doing something, and even if it is, sporadically, even if it's sparse, it's not as much as you would hope to see at the next level. Maybe that's how you project them and say, they're really good at this. I think that they could do this more in the NFL. This could be how they could win a little bit more in different ways. If you see them do it on film and you see them do it at a high level, what's to make you think that they couldn't do that more times, right? Now, as long as it's against good competition level, I think that that's always something that I look at as well, is that if they show that they could do one thing really well against the MAC teams that they play against, but they struggle to do that same thing against Big Ten competition or SEC competition, players that are more likely to play on Sundays, sometimes that is something that I look for. Matt, is there anything about Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith that gives you pause? Because that is what I always hear brought up, right? Is Jeremiah Smith takes a lot of attention off of Carnell Tate, and Carnell Tate gets favorable matchups. Is Carnell Tate a guy who's going to need to be a high-end wide receiver 2 on a team, right, that doesn't have to go up against – we talked about Tedero McMillan and how he looks when he plays against Terrell, right, as opposed to when you line him up against a more favorable matchup. Does Tate need the favorable matchup, or is Tate one of those guys that you believe has the talent to win in just about any situation that he gets thrown out in?
I think it's the latter, because while I do agree that when you're talking about separation skills, physical abilities to win, that facing the highest level of competition is important when you're looking at athletic ability. When you're looking at technical ability, technique transfers from place to place. That's why Jalen Coker is as good as he is that the techniques, the certain techniques that he exhibited transferred well to the next level, and that's where Tate is, and I think that's one of those things that they helped each other. It's not, to me, the concern that I would have is if Carnell Tate was like Kenny Golladay or Chase Claypool into production or Gabriel Davis, where it's like you have two good receivers and a good tight end, and now they're matching up those guys I mentioned against a safety or a linebacker or the worst nickel corner, and they're running routes that like even the zone isn't flowing over to that guy as the priority. They're floating to Deontay Johnson or Hines Ward or whoever it was, Juju Smith-Schuster at that time. I remember watching Claypool early on, and after 5 games going, okay, so here's the 6th game. Watch how the difference between what the Titans did against him versus the first 5 teams. They're starting to catch on. And then we never heard from Chase Claypool again, really, as a producer. And Kenny Golladay, once he joined the Giants, and they said, we're making you our number 1 receiver, and you're not being bookended by Marvin Jones and Golden Tate, who were 2 excellent technicians and ball catchers who could go up and win. And he's no longer facing linebackers and safeties on seam routes. Suddenly Kenny Golladay disappeared as well, So that's not the case with Tate. It was the case with Terrace Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. I mean, can you imagine? I still think about that all the time. Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, 2 future Hall of Fame receivers, in my opinion, played on the same team together with Joe Burrow. That's insanity.
Insane. And then Terrace Marshall Jr. didn't look like a bad college player. He was a good college player.
Yeah, very good college player.
Yeah.
And he made pro teams. He was a capable professional receiver, just not a capable starter.
Yeah. It happens, right?
Yeah.
Got a question for you here. Question for Matt, not just having to do with T-Mac, but any of these guys. With the rise of zone coverage up, is winning against man press less important than it used to be?
No, because at the end of the day, it's about the gravity of the situations where you need to play against man and press coverage that come into play. So again, volume, you may become a volume player in a lot of situations, but on in certain third down situations, you are going to certain big game situations, intermediate throws, timing passes where man coverage is important. You have to win those. And those are the ones that the top receivers, like the elite producers, they only have a small amount of man-to-man coverage wins or face man-to-man coverage less often, but they deliver there because it's not, we used to look at Des Bryant. This is a good football history thing that we can look at. Des Bryant was dominant at one point, and teams were drafting Des Bryant clones in terms of fade routes, winning the fade ball, Jordy Nelson type of players who won back shoulder fades, and you just threw the ball up and they won one-on-one. But then those guys became dinosaurs because we had spread offenses, and they were, there were more inside looks and slot looks and different routes that weren't just those types of plays. But still, if you look at Stephon Diggs during this era, he was still running timing routes at the boundary or inside and outside against tight man. Those plays still exist and still matter. And it's really the difference between being like a productive starter and being the number 1 player. And now, because we're seeing a rise of more teams use 12 and 13 personnel, because now that the spread era has forced defenses to get lighter and faster and spread out more, now we're going back to pounding the ball. Yep. And that means that man coverage is going to eventually have to be elevated and done more often to counter what's going on right now. In 3 or 4 years, we may be going back to we really have to value, man coverage is being played even more. So the man coverage beaters are, even return to even more elevated importance as even wide receiver 2s, not just the wide receiver 1.
And that's what these teams are trying to do, man. Get ahead of the curve, right? They got to figure out which one, where is this trend going to buck, right? You got McVay, who started this whole thing with having everything playing out of 11 personnel and having a bunch of fast guys out on the field. And now all of a sudden he's got 3 tight ends on 70% of the plays for the Los Angeles Rams, right? He's just toying with the rest of the league so that he can build his team how he wants to and dictate terms. It's really interesting. And that goes for the defensive side too. It's a fun conversation that we've been having about, you get some of these small linebackers that have incredible ball skills, coverage skills, speed. But then what happens when an offense forces them to get in traffic and in congestion, right? And you start getting these hog mollies that reach on the second level. What do you do when that happens? You're fast as hell, but if I got you gripped up with vice grip hands, where are you going to go, right?
Yeah.
All right, Edgar, you want to get into this next one?
Yeah, so before we get into the next one, we've got almost 400 people joining us today, so thank you for being here. Thank you for the question, threes and TDs, but if you got more questions or there's people you want to see, put it in the chat. We'll try to get everything. Matt, you're a special guest, so obviously if there's questions that people, they could hear from us any day, but if there's questions you have for Matt, please put in the chat so we could ask and get his opinion.
And we do have the super chat available as well. So if you really, really want Matt to answer the question, throw a couple bucks attached to it, and I'm sure that'll really entice us.
Look at these guys looking for bribery. Look
at me. Hey, I'm not Matt. I am not above it. You know what I mean?
There you go.
So Matt, I don't know if you know about this, but the Panthers have brought in a lot of high-level or potentially highly drafted wide receivers for their 30 visits, and so that's why we're gonna have a lot of questions about these wide receivers because they're being brought in. Not Carnell Tate, unfortunately, but and not Mekhi Lemon either. But he's someone that in this process has been falling. Some people asked me over the weekends, like, why do you think he's been falling? Could it be his interview at the combine? Could it be his testing was not the greatest on his pro day? And so, but going into the draft process, he was kind of going head to head for the one wide receiver one crown during the pre-draft process. We have him here as Ricky's wide receiver 2. Again, I know you hate rankings, but he's listed as your wide receiver 2, Matt. So can you talk a little bit about what this slide is? Do you think it's overrated? Where do you see this falling coming from? Because some mocks have him available to the Panthers at 19, and then on top of that, wide receiver is something that the Panthers are definitely looking towards drafting after Dave Canales' comments at a recent presser after who they're bringing in 30 visits. Wide receiver is definitely a position of desire, and so just wanted to get your take about what you've heard about his quote unquote fall, and would he be a fit for the Carolina Panthers?
I mean, honestly, he hasn't fallen as much as I kind of feared that he might when I did finish my scouting report on him, essentially in December, because I looked at the Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of comparison that I thought that I'm sure I've seen since other people also saw him as an Amon-Ra St. Brown type of player, and St. Brown went in the 4th round, so you could see this was a guy isn't a speed demon. He's more of a slot flanker type of combination. How often do you draft a slot in the 1st round anyway? How often do you drop them even in the first 2 to 3 rounds? Despite the fact that we've seen high-end production from slot receivers, occasionally, like Jarvis Landry was a slot receiver who went in the 2nd round. And you could see also how he might fit Jarvis Landry as a type. He goes up and wins the ball extraordinarily well, has excellent hands. He's tough as nails. He can win after the catch. He's a good route runner, strong enough to contribute right now. His separation skills aren't great at the line tight, with defenders tight to him, but he's playing flanker. He's not a split end. So they aren't going to be tight to him like that. So it doesn't really matter as much. But even as a flanker, he's going to be off the line of scrimmage some, so he may not have to deal with it as badly, but still might have some difficulties in that range too. So it just depends on the team that he lands with. If he lands on a team that's more 12 personnel and they need him to play flanker more, I think that he could drop a little bit more and maybe not be as valuable, and teams may be moving to that more often, as we discussed earlier. If he's a pure slot, that's where his upside, or a majority slot with a matchup of using him as a flanker, that's where he's going to get the greatest value. So, teams can overvalue speed. It's not how fast, it's not the faster the better. It's really how fast is the minimum for you to be a starter at the role that you're going to be playing? And that's why, like, RAS score, relative athletic score, is entertaining. But why do I care if the guy's in the 32nd percentile in a certain category when the 18th percentile is actually the minimum standard for you to say he's going to be a productive starter or high-end contributor in the NFL? So I think that that's part of the slide. Who knows about the interviews? You can listen to John Schneider talk on X about all the things that they look for, when they look at a player and what they're trying to do. And then I could counter and say I've know people who've done analytics and scouting for, multiple teams directly working with GMs telling me a lot of teams have a history of charging the wrong employees to do the evaluations of character and interviews and looking at the psychology of a player, and they editorialize way too much and don't know how to really look at the results of the answers. And there are other teams that say, we actually hire experts in these fields to tell us what it is that they observed with this data. And, and that's why teams miss sometimes, but they'll often tell you in a nicer way that, sometimes you just don't know until they get in the building. And that may be true, but it's probably less true with teams that actually understand what lane they should be in terms of, we're collecting data, we're studying film, and we'll get the experts to study behavioral analysis and criminal behavior and get people with expertise on that to tell us about recidivism rates and all sorts of stuff like that.
I think it's interesting when we had this speed conversation too about receivers, right? Like Mekhi Lemon ran like a 4.5, I think was what he was officially clocked at. Tedero McMillan ran a 4.55. Carnell Tate 4.52. All in that 4.5 range, and everyone says that's slow. It's too slow. When these guys are in open space with, like, I'm talking just a chunk of grass in front of them, and they can run straight line speed, they're going to get to where they're going with that speed. That's not slow. What I look at a lot with speed, and this is where I think Mekhi Lemon is a little bit undervalued, and this talk about him not being fast, he's quick as hell, and he can accelerate. And, like, he doesn't need a runway to get up to his speed, like his functional speed of where he can make guys miss, how he could be creative and not have to, like, throttle down and change gears with his speed. To me, that's almost more valuable, especially for a player like Mekhi Lemon, that you're not trying, like you said, his game isn't built on winning off the line and press coverage. That's not where you're going to play him on Sundays. In Sundays, you're going to try to get him in space. You're going to try to get him with extra room to create and be creative and use his tools, his contact balance, his physicality through contact. That's where you want him to be able to thrive. That's a good coach is going to try to put him in that situation more often than not. And so with some of these players, I just think that fans, we get a little bit bent out of shape about some of that testing stuff. Because before the 40 for Mekhi Lemon, if you watch his film, I don't think anyone would come away with that saying he's a slow player. Would you say he's a burner? Is he Jalen Waddle? No, he's not. But is he slow? I've never heard anyone talk about Mekhi Lemon being slow until he ran that 40, which it looked like he had been coached up to try to run it a different way. He didn't even look natural running it. Like, he had this really strange, like, gait to the way he was running it. And it was like, sometimes these guys train for these exercises after the season, and it changes the way that they run. Like, I just didn't think that it looked like a big deal to me, Matt.
Yeah, it's not. And one of the other points that my podcast partner, Brandon Angelo, who I do a show with every other Wednesday called Going Deep. Brandon is a trainer of athletes, professional athletes, including many NFL players. And one of the things that he brought up that I thought was a salient point is, let's talk about Randy Moss, possibly the fastest wide receiver in the history of the game, at least on the level of how he played on the field at a high level. And he noted that if you look at players who were even within shouting distance of his 40 time, many of them failed to do anything more than one-dimensional work in the league. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you have to process information to track the ball well, to work after the catch well, to run routes. And a lot of that comes at playing at your top speed. If you can't do that at your top speed, the faster that you run a route, the faster you are with certain routes and adjustments and all the things you do, the more you have to process it as fast as you move. Yep. And that's harder to do. The faster you move, the harder it is to actually process as fast as you're moving. So there's something to be said about maybe guys who are in that high 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, if they process fast enough, they can be devastatingly good. But if you process like you're a 4.7 player, but you run a 4.3, you're in a world of hurt. And that's the thing is Randy Moss was so rare is that he processed the game as fast as he actually played it. And most players win and get separation because it's not just straight speed. It's how you vary pace. It's how you set up footwork. It's understanding the position that the defender has. DeAndre Hopkins is not fast.
Yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins was one of the best receivers of this era. And it was because he knew all the angles. He knew how to earn position. He knew how to catch. He could take contact, and he could get separation on deep routes despite not having. He was playing in Baltimore last year, and they just did not use him. But when they did, he got separation.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he lost anything. So I think that I think that we have to understand that it's way more than just speed, and we sometimes over value that. I joke that speed is the cleavage of NFL decision makers, in terms of like old school, like sexism type of stuff.
Yeah.
But like they see that cleavage, and suddenly any real good thought process went out the window for some of these people. And I would say that it's almost stereotypically a caricature, but they see the speed, and suddenly if it's there or it's not there, suddenly they're upgrading and downgrading on something that has nothing or very little, in this case, very little to a lot less to do with what's going to make them successful in the league. Even if you're in a client-facing profession and you want someone, male or female, who is handsome or objectively good-looking in your sales department, I understand the value of that. But yeah, there's a point where we start to go, the more the better gets to become a caricature and has diminishing returns.
It's like why in the early 2000s you go and see a Hooters right next to an actual good chicken place, right? And the Hooters parking lot is slam packed because it's appealing. There's other stuff there than just chicken, right? But the good chicken is actually in the building to the right of it.
Right.
It's a very interesting thing. I love that analogy. I'm all for weird analogies, Matt. It is one of my sticks.
Ricky's gonna steal that now.
That's my wheelhouse, dude. Take it.
I banked that one, and I'm like, all right, I got to workshop that.
Look, I've wrote the article. It's on my site. We're good. You can take it all you want, man.
Oh man, that's good. And you know what? Talking about speed too, the Panthers fans, we've got to know this too. As Panthers fans, we got a guy on our team right now that ran 4.3 at 6'2", 227 pounds, right? And look like this amazing, incredible athlete. And he's a great athlete, but he needs a runway to get up to that speed. In close quarters, he's not a 4.3 fast guy. He's a strong guy. He's got strong hands, right? He has got some drop issues right now. Seem to be a little bit more concentration than anything else, maybe even confidence with him. But like that speed isn't the same speed all the time. You need a guy that can win with the speed if he's got it functional. I love what you said, Angelo talked about with the processing matching the speed, because it makes a ton of sense in every element. Like you don't have to just think about it from a receiver, but if your brain doesn't move as fast as your body, we all know this. I've walked into doors before because I forget to open it before my body gets there, right? Like we've all done stupid things where you're moving a little bit faster inside than out. And in football, it all has to be really tied together in a clean way. So that makes a ton of sense to think about it that way. Matt, this next guy I think is one of the more divisive players, at least at the top three. There is this consensus belief that there is a top three in this class for wide receivers. And it is Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, and this guy, Jordan Tyson. Regardless of how you have them ranked, those seem to be the first three. I know that's not the case with you. And I can't wait to hear why that's not the case with you. For anyone listening that cares about my rankings, I know that we've been doing this on Panthers on Tap, and we have the Carolina Draft Guide where it'll hopefully be out at the beginning of next week. Jordan Tyson falls in the same bucket as the next guys after him for me, Matt. It is Jordan Tyson, it is KC Concepcion, and it is Omar Cooper Jr., and they are neck and neck for me. Their scores, their grades, like their numerical values are extremely close for me. Jordan Tyson is super dynamic. I think that he's got all of the twitch and wiggle that you look for, and people wanted to compare him to Malik Neighbors. I don't think that it was on that level for me, but his movement is really appealing. He's got a very fluid movement style, very twitchy. He dances a bit for my flavor or for my preference. I think that some of it is a little bit disjointed almost in a way. But he's got some spectacular ability of catching the ball away from his frame, makes you feel really good about his hands. He improved that drop rate a lot this season. That's going to make people feel more comfortable about it. I don't see a massive yards after the catch threat with Jordan Tyson. I think that he has the athletic ability, but I don't necessarily see the plan that he has with it. What are your thoughts about Jordan Tyson, and where do you have him ranked?
Yeah, I think Jordan Tyson could easily develop into one of the top, if not the top receivers in this class. That in theory, he could do that. But in reality, in the practicality of what, like, the odds of that happening are less than what the theory might give you to indicate. And the reason is that his game is brought down by a death of 1,000 paper cuts. He's the type of player that when you look at his highlights and you look at his best routes, they're very impressive. But down to down, play to play, there's invariably decision-making errors, technical errors, and conceptual errors with the releases he uses, the stems, and the manipulation of the stems that he uses to set up defenders in off coverage or man coverage. His breaks can be sloppy. His catch point stuff can be technically unsound even when he catches the ball. It's not that they're all bad on every play, but they pop up at different points. And it's like watching something where you're trying to basically hold water and you keep springing a leak in a different place in the container that you're trying to hold that water in. And sometimes 2 come out or 3 come out, spring a leak. And then you finally get those patched up and another one gets sprung. And I think that his game has too much of that right now. And so any number of these things that I mentioned bring him down to where he makes errors. And there's just too many like small errors that may not ever get patched up, on top of the fact that the knee injury he had seems to maybe influence the hamstring issues he's having and that he's still dealing with right now. So there's concern that maybe how his body's built maybe creates some chronic issues, or that the demands of the game based on the build of his body and what's going on, that he may need to rebuild how he's rebuild himself in a way so that he can withstand the grind of playing the position at the level that he wants to. So I see him as kind of, and also when you look at like the Malik Neighbors thing, I could see that as a comparison point. I just think that he must understand, he doesn't understand how to vary pacing on the level that he should. That's why he looks herky-jerky at times.
Yeah.
Because he's not there. You want to time things in a way where that you show some patience to bait the defender, and then you're sudden in a way where you pull that trigger and the defender's out of position, and you leverage that with that quickness. But it's still sometimes what he does with his setups is he's too fast at the wrong point, and it's like a blur, and the defender doesn't even register what it is you tried to do to trick him. It's like instead of like a twist in a movie where you show the twist and you put it out there, and then it turns on a hairpin turn after that's sudden, but the twist, the setup of that twist is long enough. He moves so fast that it's more like Brad Pitt putting a subliminal message into the film in Fight Club, where you don't even notice what happened. You don't even react really. You just have this uneasy feeling underneath because you might have seen something that didn't register consciously. So it's like the defender doesn't even register the move sometimes that Jordan Tyson puts on them. And so he's got to get better at really these types of setups. And so his game is Very good, and I have him as a guy who's almost an instant starter, and probably could be if he's on a team that doesn't have more than one good starter. But if he were going to the Vikings, or he were going to the Buccaneers, or the Bengals, or a team, the Chargers, or the Rams, he might get to be a wide receiver 3 for a little bit, and they'd have to force him into it. And if he does become goes to the Titans, or he goes to the Panthers, he might be an up and down player early on, where people are criticizing a lot of the errors that he makes as he's trying to grow into the job, as he's got the job in hand.
When you talk about the stems and his releases and maybe using the wrong ones, I saw it the same way, Matt, but I saw it in a way almost of when you have a job that you need to use a flathead, right? Or you need to use a Phillips head. You can technically use a flathead to make that work sometimes. It's going to take you longer. It's going to really be a tedious process. It might work, but it throws off the flow of the rest of the job. And so just because it works individually for that occasion doesn't mean it's the approach you should always take to use a flathead for a Phillips head job.
I like that.
Good. I just got the approval on an analogy for Matt Waldman. Man, my day's made. All right, we should end this show now. What do you say, boys? Matt, you said about going to Carolina. What is the fit here in Carolina with Jordan Tyson, with the current wide receiver room set up the way that it is, with Teteroa McMillan, with Jalen Coker, and Edgar and I, we cover the Panthers. We talk about them throughout the season. We focus on what they have going and with the coaching staff. They seem to love Jalen Coker here in Carolina. Jalen Coker's biggest impediment to his success so far in his career, his young career, has been availability. He's dealt with injuries the first 2 seasons, but when he has been healthy and been on the field, it looks like he's got a great rapport with Bryce Young. He looks like the right kind of player for Bryce Young as an anticipatory thrower. He is a all business type of player. He does the things that he needs to do. He executes efficiently on his releases and in his routes and his timing. He's got sure hands. I think that they want to keep him as a feature player in this offense if he is healthy. I don't see them wanting to replace Jalen Coker with a wide receiver 2. But I think that this staff has been very intentional about saying, hey, we want guys that can line up anywhere, that we want the versatility. We want the ability to have our best players out on the field. And so would Jordan Tyson come in, and this is where you were talking about that instant starter role, right? Does he come in as he an instant starter for this Carolina team? Does he take Xavier Legette kind of out of the picture as a wide receiver 3 that can play inside flanker? Or does he kind of have to wait and see what happens with Jalen Coker, and maybe he's not the right pick at 19 because of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Tyson could probably play flanker or split end once he really kind of adjusts. And I think that with Coker, I think Coker and McMillan can both probably play inside and outside as big slots and split ends. They could, or either one of them can be I think T-Mac is probably better off as a flanker. You could probably use him as a flanker because he has some compelling skill after the catch, and you can also still use him on the outside. But then you could use Tyson outside and put Coker as your big play slot receiver inside, and I think that would work. And then Coker, as a result, each of these guys can play 2 roles. I think, if you had Tyson in there, and you'd have 3 players who could play 2 roles, and you could kind of mix and match depending on what it is the looks are and what you're trying to do and who does what best. So I think that's worthwhile. I think it would relegate Xavier Legette to a reserve role in a 4 receiver look, maybe situational opportunities in certain field position circumstances, or coverage looks. But Tyson, I would imagine, would be a guy that you would want to see start right away. Do I think he's the best fit for Carolina? No. But I think that if it happened, I think there'd still be reason for optimism and excitement. I just think that, there are some players that maybe you would prefer, to him. So we'll see.
And I know you don't usually account for the injury stuff with your evaluations, but we touched on it briefly at the top of this conversation with Jordan. How much of a concern is it for you, man? Is this something that you think? I know you can't really, no one can really give a full answer on this without being his physician, knowing
Yeah.
the build of it, knowing like his body. But are you concerned about the injury history?
I mean, somewhat. I mean, it's
Yeah.
certainly, I do grade for it, but I grade in a very basic way. Like,
Right.
I'm not digging into medical reports most of the time. I only get a certain number, as certain people only get a certain number too. But I just look for things like, have they missed more than 10% of their college career? Have they had an injury that required a long rehab? Have they had chronic injuries that continue to pop up? And after their injury, did they see a significantly diminished level of play, displays of athletic ability because of the injury? Those are things I'm looking for as to potentially mark a player down. So, I mean, the chronic injury part is a little bit of a concern. The fact that it's taken a while for him to rehab is a bit of a concern there, as I stated, and why. But it's not a huge concern at this point. But it does separate him from being among my top three.
Yeah, makes sense. And where do you have Jordan Tyson, just out of curiosity, so that I can make you say it so everyone could yell at you later?
Sure, it's sixth. He has a score. He has a score just under an immediate starter. It's like a half a point between the tier of being a guy who can contribute at a high level right now and a guy who, so he could start, but I think that you're going to, like I said, you're going to see drop passes. You're going to see misrun routes. You're going to see him fail to separate at times against better opponents. You're going to see things. You're going to see errors like that in between big plays. And you go, the fans are going to go, well, did you see that play? Only 3 people can make that play in the league, when really probably 13 or 15 can. But they'll say that, and then the people who didn't like him, see, I told you he's dropping passes left and right. He's a bust. He's not either. He could bust if these things don't get corrected, and eventually teams go, look, we're getting guys. We can draft a guy any year who's got an equal level of play with more potential to improve because he's got more solid technique.
Right.
So
Edgar,
Matt,
for this next one, let's do a combo of the next two when you do it.
A combo of the next two, sure.
Yeah.
We've got. We might want to spend some. I also had some questions I wanted to bring up because you teased it out a little bit, Matt, and we're closing in like more than halfway through our show here. So thank you for those that are being with us. We're close to 500 people joining us today. So thank you again for being here with us. You teed this out, Matt, but we have a couple, as Ricky said, to combo here. We have Casey Concepcion, who's coming in for a local visit, still a private visit, but he's a local player, grew up in Charlotte. So he's a common mocked person to the Panthers. And then we also have Omar Cooper Jr., went on the top 30 visits. When we play mock draft simulator games, like myself included, these are the type of guys who are available. If you look at the mainstream mocks, these are the type of guys who are available. And then maybe we can pick it back while we're mentioning these players. Similar questions here. Again, you teased it out a little bit, Matt, but Antrax99 says, what type of receiver skill set should the Panthers be looking for at wide receiver? And then from JP Tay, question for Matt. Who does he see as a perfect fit for the Panthers? Is it a Casey Concepcion who adds speed and a dynamism, or a guy I love, Ted Hurst, who could play outside and let Ted be moved around more? I know this is a loaded question. So many different players, so many different types of players that could possibly fit. But just in the how can I say this? With the constraints of Omar Cooper and Casey Concepcion or others that the Panthers are considering, who do you see as types of players that are prospects in this draft class that you would see as fitting Jalen Coker and Tanner McMillan, especially since you mentioned that they could play multiple positions?
Right. I mean, I think I really like Coker and what he can do. I do wonder how much upside he actually has. So do you see him as like a very good team player who you can fit in a couple of positions, but you'd rather have him off the bench? I would say in the best case scenario, that would probably be the realistic thing. And then you take T-Mac and you say, okay, I can use you as a big slot, and you could be like a leading volume getter from the slot as a big slot, or as a I would want to use as a flanker. And then that means to me, Concepcion is more of a slot flanker type than he is a split end type. I really like him. He's my number 4 player as well on the board. But to me, he's more of like how the Bills should use Khalil Shakir and maybe have a little more upside. And they don't. Or
I like
how
that. I never thought of Khalil Shakir, Matt. I like that.
Or the other Steve Smith II from the Giants,
Yeah.
who was a monster at USC, who was very good before knee injuries basically robbed him of his career, but he was a guy who had a couple of strong seasons, who could do it all from a flanker slot role. There's some catch issues that he's going to have to fix, and I think that it may lead to situational drops with him, mainly high targets and high away targets, some that he catches right now. He's a savvy route runner, very good, dynamic. He would be the most dynamic player with the ball in his hands of the Panthers in the receiving corps easily. So you like that, but do you want more of a split end like a Carnell Tate, who can then allow you to move T-Mac and Jalen Coker inside and have them switch inside out? I think that's the ideal, honestly. I think a flanker kind of limits then what you can do, and then you either that or you're taking your big time flanker off the field. Whichever one. I don't love the flanker first kind of thing with that. So Concepcion's interesting. Omar Cooper I like, because Omar Cooper probably could play split end at times and flanker, so you can kind of move him around a little bit more. Cooper, to me, people talk about Deebo Samuel a lot with him because of his running ability, but he's 20 pounds lighter. That's not going to happen. The guy, but he's physical after the catch. He's a better route runner than Deebo Samuel was at this point in their careers, and probably will be. I think he can become a very good timing route runner. He's got the speed to win deep, more than enough to be a split end if you need him to be, though he's more built like a flanker. The player he reminds me of is a player that, riddled a lot of the NFC South for years, and that's Roddy White, who is a physical player in his own right, who, you saw it time and time again in the peak of their careers opposite Julio Jones, when it was 3rd and 15, 2nd and 17, 3rd and 20, and they were gonna double Roddy White on a comeback or an out, and Matt Ryan still got the necessary yards, putting it into that small window with White. I think Omar Cooper has the potential to develop into a player somewhat similar as that. And so if you put him there, you can still utilize his after the catch skills as a runner, as a flanker, but you can probably occasionally get away with putting him as a split end, and then you have a little bit more flexibility with all three players.
The Indiana offense. Anything about that? Because look, when you hear people talk about Mendoza, right, you hear all about the RPO based offense that they play and all this kind of stuff. Anything about that Indiana offense? And Omar Cooper, he had 2 good seasons production wise. He's not a 1-year explosion that just kind of came from a result of the system and everything else like that. Like, this is a good football player, and he's put in the work. You hear about all of his work ethic and dedication to the craft. This seems like a guy that NFL teams would really appreciate and enjoy because of those sentiments. Anything about that Indiana offense that makes it difficult to project the next level for their skilled players and stuff like that?
Not really, because it's not like the Tennessee offense or the Baylor offense where the players are playing basically a hair's breadth from the sideline, and because everything's stretched out some more, that it's easier to read what's going on. Whereas when you get into the NFL, you're got tighter splits, so now there's more things that you have to account for when you're trying to be on the same page as your quarterback. That's not the case with Omar Cooper. I know there's a lot of RPOs, there's also a lot of fade routes and things like that, but he still had to read a defense that was, a little bit more like what you would see in the NFL, at least in terms of spacing. So it's not going to be as that much of a problem overall.
And where did you have Omar on your rankings?
8th. I have him as a guy who could eventually be your clear-cut starter, and he can contribute right now, especially if he's in a room where there's three options.
And that's the same tier as the
Tyson.
Yeah.
He's just a couple spots below, where Tyson's at the top of that tier, bordering on instant starter. Cooper's just a little bit below.
Gotcha.
Can I ask? I know we have another graphic, but because we're talking about this tier, and I'm just looking at the RSP, and you have someone right in between Tyson and Cooper, who was just reported to have a 30 visit this morning. And so wanted to get your quick thoughts about Chris Brazzell from oh yeah, we do have a graphic. Wow, Ricky.
Did it this morning when I saw the report.
Since he's in the same cluster of those three, maybe you could talk a little bit about what he would add to the Panthers offense and to that wide receiver room.
Yeah, I mean, again, you look at those splits and you worry about that a little bit. He might have to develop with how he reads coverage and is on the same page as Bryce Young early on. But he also played at Tulane. It wasn't like he spent his entire career at Tennessee. He's kind of my joke as the winner of the 3-man George Pickens lookalike contest in the class in terms of build and what he does well as a rebounder and a contested catch guy. And there's some ability after the catch as a runner. He also runs slants and ins and overs really well, which, Pickens also can do. So he gives you a bit of that vibe. And I think that he's someone that could develop into a solid starter.
And I'm not usually much of a fan of the Tennessee wide receivers because of all those things that we just talked about with the offense of it. Hyatt a couple years ago just wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. Fast guy, burner. But Brazzell, his tape at Tulane, and I watched 3 of his Tulane games. He actually does have some chops though, as a route runner. Like I think that he's got a little bit more. You talked about the sinking of hips being a critical component of what you look for there. I think that Brazzell does that well. I think that he's got some good wiggle and shake to him, and he does have that threatening speed, right? And that is something that is just devoid for the Carolina Panthers at this point. So even having that on the field could do wonders for that. But I actually came away higher on Chris Brazzell than I thought I was going to be just when I saw the helmet and the jerseys, right? And that's just my natural tendency is to see Tennessee and have some hesitation before I even get into the tape.
Like it.
All right. So then we had a couple other guys, and no, we don't have the whole backup of the stats and stuff on these, so we can run through these pretty quick and move on to our tight ends. Dejon Stribling. This is a guy for Ole Miss. Productive career. This guy's got some good production on there. He's a physical football player. Matt, tell us a little bit about Stribling for you.
Very good blocker. Certainly you see where that size speed can fit well in terms of long speed, build up speed. There are times that the way he reads the field, I think, is a little slower as a processor. So sometimes he looks like he's kind of running in concrete, and wet cement right now at times with his game. So there's developmental upside with him, but I don't think he's a player that you would want to draft in the second or third round and go, oh, we can put him in right away. I think you're going to feel the same. You would feel the way you did about Mingo or Leggett thus far, but at a lower price.
All right. So real quick, actually, you know what? We're going to move on real quick to tight ends because I want to make sure that we talk at least a little bit about Kenyon Sadiq. Kenyon Sadiq is the polarizing prospect. He's the one that a lot of people have the Panthers tabbed at picking at 19. He is everyone's clear-cut tight end 1. He is my tight end 1 as well, but I have a second-round grade on Kenyon Sadiq. I don't have a first-round grade. I actually like his blocking a little bit more than I like the conversation about him being a sure thing as a ultra-dynamic receiver and being a mismatch at the next level. Matt, talk to me about Kenyon Sadiq for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's an elite speedster. He's got the acrobatic gifts you're looking for at the catch point. His route skills need some work. There's some times where he just either tips off what he's doing or he's a little slow in terms of reading what he needs to do, so he isn't playing to the speed that he's timed at. There's some, I see him as maybe potentially doing what Delaney Walker could do for a team at the height of his career. And he could contribute right now. But it just depends on the team that he goes to. If you're going to look for a team where he's got to be better than the wide receiver 3, or the wide receiver 2, I'm not sure he can do that just yet. Like, he makes some acrobatic plays, but he also makes mistakes at the catch point that you want to see him be a little bit better at. So I like him, don't love him, but a lot of players I like are good starters, and he could become a good starter with the right fit. You just wonder. Carolina likes to run the ball. They've run the ball well.
Mhm.
I don't, I think that at his size, he can be what Tremble is as a
Mhm.
blocker, but do you need more than that?
But
You
you
might,
have Tremble, yeah.
yeah.
Last year, Matt, when you were on the show, you brought up Jackson Hawes as a potential fit that you liked a lot for Carolina, and I love that because we were high on Jackson as well, being that inline blocker. That also an ability to be a move blocker as well. Though he had the athleticism that he could do a little bit of that insert work and things like that. Eli Stowers is another tight end that people are high on that gets connected to Carolina. Where did you have Eli, and what are your thoughts on him? Because he's not a blocker at all. You're not going to want this guy to do much blocking, but as a receiver, he's pretty dynamic.
Yeah. I think that he can be an okay move blocker in the way that you would look at maybe Jordan Reed or somebody like that back in the day, where, double team the backside with somebody, stalk block. I think all of those things he'd be able to do. Some lead blocking, some wind back blocking. I think he'll get better at. He was a former quarterback. He was a highly recruited quarterback in the SEC before he tore up a knee at the end of his junior year, and then a labrum injury. He wanted to keep playing at New Mexico State, and they said, "Well, we'll put you at tight end." And so he's had a 3-year career as a tight end. He's my tight end one, and mainly from a move standpoint, he's my tight end one. He's explosive. He has reliable hands. He runs excellent routes in the middle of the field. He can make plays against tight coverage. Really, really good after the catch too. I think he's going to be better than what Isaiah Likely is right now, even though Likely is likely to get more volume in the John Harbaugh offense in New York. I think that Stowers compares favorably to that, and if he can develop more skills as a blocker, I think he could maybe be closer to what we see with Trey McBride. Not as good, but close.
Pretty dang good. That's pretty dang good. All right, this is a tight end. Every Panthers player or every Panthers fan right now is hearing about. He's connected to the Panthers. The Panthers are reportedly very high on him. There are a lot of people that believe that Oscar Delp is a top 2-3 tight end in this class. I struggle with that, Matt, because of the usage and the production. It is very minimal. He had some weird usage at Georgia. Their offense wasn't an overly air attack type of offense. Zachariah Branch, I think, was their leading receiver, and he had like 75 receptions, and I think 74 of them were, 3 yards or shorter. Oscar Delp, talk to me a little bit about him and where you have him.
He could easily be one of the top 3 tight ends on my board if he shows that he can win contested targets where there's hard hits coming. I didn't see him do that. But he is a good route runner who can move safeties and linebackers off their spot during his stems and do it in an efficient way. He's a smooth runner after the catch with good athletic ability, and he is an underrated route blocker because at 245, I'll probably play at 255. But he uses his hands well. He knows how to punch. He knows how to earn position, and that's helped him and served him well against bigger SEC defenders who will eventually be good or serviceable pros on defense. So as he grows, I think that he could develop into a good 2-way tight end, even though he's more of a move guy. If he develops the hands, like I said, he could wind up being one of the top 3 tight ends on the board when it's said and done. It's just that we need to see proof of concept with that, and that's a hard proof of concept to attain. Is that inherent? I don't want to say that he's soft. He's not. He's not a soft player remotely, but there's a difference between being good when the ball is, when you're open or when there's maybe tight coverage, and being good when someone's bearing down on you and delivering a hard blow. And that's where we've got to see a little bit more from him.
Well, thank you, Matt. I know you got to run. Actually, can I ask you one super quick person? Because we have one of this, we have basically Eli Heidenreich's biggest fans with us, and so I don't know if you want to give us a quick 30-second spiel about, he's a unique player because he doesn't fit into a bucket. So
Yeah.
where would you see him successful in the NFL, and what role and what
Yeah.
position, and what would he do?
Yeah, I'd like to see him as a wide receiver, not as a running back, because they didn't use the full rank complement of types of schemes that you would want to show as a running back. It's not like he was running between the tackles, other than on some gap plays, but mostly draws when they ran him between the middle, in between the tackles. Usually they used him as kind of a receiver running around the perimeter. There's some elements to route running that I think that he can continue to develop. Tracks the ball reasonably well. So I think he's good there, and in the return game. So if he can be a good return specialist or on kick coverage, and then let him build his receiving skills, you might have something there.
All right, Katie,
All
you
right.
got your wish. You got Eli.
So Matt, before we wrap up, I know we did at the beginning. We've added so many more people to watch us. So just as a wrap up, can you share with the people, share with the fans where they could see your amazing work if they want to follow you and see what this RSP hype is all about?
Sure, you can, if you get on social media and you like X or you use X, you can find me at Matt Waldman. You can find me also at footballguys.com, which is a fantasy football website. I do film work there that's more NFL oriented still, even though I do dish out a lot of fantasy advice, because I've been doing that since 2003. MattWaldmanRSP.com is where you can see a lot of the written work I do. And then Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room on YouTube was where my podcasts are, and you can see a lot of that as well. And, MattWaldman.com is where you can just buy the book right now. I've been doing this so long that I've had to adopt with a couple of websites. We're going to be consolidating that fairly soon. But I've been doing this 21 years. So sometimes what happens, you get so busy that you kind of just have to make makeshift things at work and see how that goes. But that's where you can find me.
You're a victim of your own success, Matt. Like, you have more websites than you need.
And yet, despite being so busy with all of that and having 7 different websites, you found a couple of minutes to come out here and hang out with us, man, and inform everybody. I appreciate it, Matt. Seriously, man, we look forward to this episode. This is our second time doing this with you. We look forward to this. This has been a privilege. I'm
looking forward to number 3, man, for sure. This was a lot of fun with you guys. You asked great questions, and I appreciate you guys having me, and for the audience, for you guys to come out and listen. And we appreciate you.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, Edgar, what do you say? You want to finish up this episode and do a little bit on our own here, or you like where we're leaving it?
I don't know. What do you?
Well, let's see.
we got some time.
Left. And I don't really have much left. We got through most of it.
How about this, Ricky?
Yeah.
Can I ask you the questions that are in the chat?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's wrap up with
you're an expert. You're doing evaluations. You're making a draft guide, so you should have some answers here.
Expert
is that okay?
Probably. Yeah, no, it's perfectly fine. If you guys want to be entertained by me babbling for a little bit, I'm cool with it. I got the time.
All right, here's one that I saw that I thought was pretty cool. From X, JLC says, who are the split end options for the Panthers in this draft? So maybe we could talk a little bit about what does it mean by split end versus a flanker versus a slot. But then if they decide to go that route, who in your rankings, who in your evaluations, you're like, oh, this would be an awesome split end for the Panthers
it's interesting that Matt was kind of talking about that, because I hadn't really thought too much about that. Really, what I've been focusing on is kind of what the Panthers seem to have been most interested in. Now, Denzel Boston, I think, would definitely fall in that bucket, right, of like a split end wide receiver. I didn't think that was a great fit with the current wide receiver room. That one was the one that threw me off. Denzel Boston is my wide receiver 10.
Because you said that they're going to draft Denzel Boston.
They're probably going to draft him now, right? Bryce Lance is another guy, though, that I'm interested in, that I know that you're a fan of as well. Bryce Lance came out as my wide receiver 8. Again, he brings that speed element that you do look for. The level of competition is a fair question, I think, with Bryce Lance, because he did play at North Dakota State. But his speed and his athleticism looks real deal on film. It matched the testing. He was running away from guys. He's shifty enough in close quarters, but he's a big body guy at 6'3", 206, 33 and a quarter inch arms. He can still go up and he can get it. He can still be a red zone threat. I think that he can work with the Carolina Panthers. for what Matt was talking about, being able to throw T-Mac or Coker inside, but having a player that can also line up outside as an X or as a Z and be able to take one of those alignments. I think that makes sense. Ted Hurst is a guy that JP was talking about in the chat. I like Ted Hurst. He's cool. I've got him as my 13th wide receiver, which is pretty good. I mean, this wide receiver class has some serious talent in it. I don't think that it's as rich at the very top as other drafts maybe have been. But I don't think that this is a devoid of talent class either. So Ted Hurst at 13 is cool. He's 6'3", 207 pounds, 32 3/8 inch arms, vertical threat. He's fast with the ball in his hands as well. Now look, he played at Georgia State and he transferred over from, I believe it was Valparaiso or something along those lines. I can't remember. I'd have to look at my sheet. But yeah, I know. I'd have to look back at it.
Are you the beast?
No, not at all. Not at all, man. Look, Dane Brugler, he put that thing out, and I was just like, so what am I even doing? Why am I spending all these nights up until 3 a.m. drinking coffee at midnight? Like, what am I doing with my life? But yeah, Ted Hurst is interesting. I have a 3rd round grade on Ted Hurst. I have a 2nd on Chris Brazzell, who we talked about earlier, a 2nd on Bryce Lance, and a 2nd on Denzel, or a 3rd on Denzel Boston. 3rd on Bryce Lance as well. Listen to me. I'm all wrong about that. I just pulled up my sheet, so I'm trying to give accurate information. Jacoby Lane, I think, is another guy that maybe you could hear about. DeJon Stribling, possibly at 6'2", 205, physical player. We talked about him. I'm not a big Elijah Surratt guy. That's a guy that I have as my 18th wide receiver, early day 3 grade. Malachi Fields, I've seen popping up in a lot of people's like top 6, top 7. I'm much lower. I hate to say that. He is my wide receiver 20. That's probably my biggest swing discrepancy of consensus is going to be a guy like Malachi Fields. So yeah, that would be my immediate thoughts on somebody in that position.
Since the Chris Brazzell news came out today, like, would you be happy with him at 51, or is that too rich? Would you rather?
That's rich for me. That's rich for me. I've got a 3rd round grade on Brazzell. I said 2nd, but I just looked at my sheet. It is a 3rd round grade. He is my wide receiver 7, so I mean, I do like him. He is a talented player. But I think that for what he is, being a bit one note right now, and I don't mean that he can only do one thing. I just mean that he does one thing exceptionally well over other things, and that it's going to take some time for him to fully develop into a whole usage type of player if he ever develops into that. 51 for me, with the meat of this draft class being in the 2nd and 3rd round, I think that you're going to have some pretty legitimate options there at 51, whether it's offensive line, an interior offensive lineman, a secondary defender, or a linebacker, depending on what you do with round 1, right? Because the big question is going to be, do they stay at 19? Do they move up? Do they go back? Does somebody fall? My dream, Edgar, and we'll talk about this because it's Draft Crush. My dream is for Dylan Thieneman to end up at 19 and for the Carolina Panthers to take him. That is my favorite target for the Carolina Panthers, I think.
So that's your agenda.
That is, man. That is my agenda, and I would plant my flag in that one and push it because I think that what he does for this defense would be tremendous. I think that it gives you a really high-end safety on the back end of that defense. I think you could see him in, the single high coverage. I think that you could play 2 high shells. I just think that he opens up a lot, man. And if you want to, if you have, Trayvon Merrick playing sub-package linebacker, you can have Dylan up there at the line too, man, and really confuse the offense early on. I mean, this is not you think of a safety, right? This is not a slight player, man. He enjoys physicality. He screams downhill. He is a sound tackler, but he's got good ball skills too. I love his versatility, Edgar. So that would be my guy at 19.
Question for you before we get into the tight ends. Another person that came up that's kind of like, I don't know, Denzel Boston was kind of an outlier. Sure. So another wide receiver that they brought in for a visit who's kind of an outlier was Deion Burks out of Oklahoma. And so do you like his fit for the Panthers? And where would you feel comfortable them taking him? Like, which round would you feel comfortable with them if Carolina were to take him?
I'm going to sound like a hater on this one again, similar to how I felt about Malachi Fields, because I'm even lower on Deion Burks. Deion Burks is my wide receiver 22 in this class. Love his speed. I love how fast he is. It shows up on tape, the speed that he tested with, right? I believe this guy ran like 4.3.
You love his cleavage.
Yeah, the cleavage is great, man. Like, I think that he would make a hell of a waitress at a certain establishment. You know what I mean? But for me, first of all, man, he's small. Like, if we're going to talk about size and stuff like that, this is a 5'9", 184, but his frame, you're talking about sub 30-inch arms, 29.5-inch arms, sub 71-inch wingspan. Now he's 4 foot or 4.3 flat 40. He is fast, and his 10-yard split is 1.49. I mean, he gets out of the gate quick, and he is a short area burst of a blur of a human. Great stuff. He's had some injury in his past as well that he's dealt with. I don't think that he's a full range wide receiver. I think that he's more of a gadget player right now. If I'm going to go with one of these micro wide receivers, right, I love Brennan Thompson as far as having a little bit more well-rounded potential as a wide receiver, but still bring that speed. Now, Brennan Thompson is even smaller in the weight department. Brennan Thompson is small, man. He's like 165, I think. That's
the
Tank Dell.
micros.
Yeah, that's Tank Dell area, right? But with about 2 or 3 inches shorter than Tank. And we see that Tank has had some issues. His issues have also come off the field where he's had some injury issues that, you know, no part of football. It's just happened. But then he's had the gruesome football injury. So I'm a little bit timid about all of them. If you're looking for a guy that can create after the catch, but you don't necessarily want to go super duper small, and you don't want to spend the first round pick on a Omar Cooper or a KC Concepcion or something like that, I'm a big Skylar Bell guy. I love Skylar Bell. And I know Brugler, I believe, was lower on him. I think that Brugler had Skylar Bell at like 16 or something like that. And I get it, competition level. You know, he transferred over to UConn. Since he's been at UConn, he has been ultra productive. He had great testing numbers, though, I thought. Skylar Bell, all of the athleticism that you see against that testing or against that level of competition, I thought it showed up. 4.4 flat, 41-inch vertical, 11-foot broad jump, 6.65 on the 3-cone, 4.11 on the shuttle. And this is a guy in Skylar Bell that is 5'11", 196, right? So this is a very similar size as a KC Concepcion. And he's got longer arms and the wingspan. He's got a 73, almost 74-inch wingspan, right? So, I mean, this is a guy that, 77-inch wingspan for Skylar Bell. I'm sorry. I was looking at Concepcion. So this is a dude that has a very appealing profile. He's a bit older, though. I think he's 23, maybe even 24 as a rookie. So he's a bit older. But I like him as a or early day 3 or late day 2 guy.
Well, if you want to talk about a spicy take, he's Matt Waldman's wide receiver 5, just above Jordan Tyson, just below KC Concepcion.
Well, hey, he's my wide receiver 6.
So why do you hate Skylar Bell?
I don't. He's my 6. That's great. You know what? That's crazy. I would have made a Skylar Bell graphic if I'd have realized that. And I've looked over the RSP, and maybe I just saw it and I was like, okay, cool, we're in unison. But then seeing the beast recently and seeing that Brugler had him so much lower, maybe that's what threw me. But Skylar was there, man, when I did the pre-combine rankings on Panthers on Tap, and we might have even talked about it a little bit on one of our shows. I had him at 6 or 7 then. I mean, it didn't change for me. I love his tape. I think the kid is a real deal player. It is the age thing and the level of competition, I think, is what throws him down. And if you can afford to wait and get him in round 3, maybe even round 4 or round 5, hey, if Dane's right and you can get this guy in round 5 or round 6, sign me up. If I get to use pick 158 or 159 on Skylar Bell, I'm a happy camper. I think this dude comes in and elevates that wide receiver room immediately for the Carolina Panthers.
Here's Matt's quote about him. The only wide receiver whose vision rivals Concepcion is Skylar Bell, and Bell has better agility and speed.
I was just talking about KC Concepcion and him. Man, I wish Matt was here so he could see the smile on my face right now of realizing all of this.
I'm glad we have a chat with both you and Matt, because if I didn't know you guys, you're separate people, I would have thought I've never seen you both in the same room.
It's like the same thing, right? Except, you know, my gray has a little bit more of like the orange and brown left in it. But JP asks, he says, yo, Ricky, how good are Jeremy Bernard and Chris Bell? Interesting prospects here for me. Jeremy Bernard, I actually like a decent bit, JP. I've got him as my wide receiver 9, 3rd round grade on him. I just think he's one of those, doesn't do anything flashy, doesn't do anything exceptionally, well, or in a way that's going to catch your eye. but he's a really solid football player, and he's going to be able to do some of the dirty work. He's kind of like a glue type player, but a high level glue type player. I like Jeremy Bernard. I think that he's a really good football player. I think he's going to have an impact in the NFL. Is he ever going to be a guy that makes Pro Bowls or anything like that, or leads the league in receiving or receiving touchdowns or anything? Probably not. I wouldn't bet my mortgage on that. But will he stick around in the league for 7 or 8 years as an active player? I would feel pretty comfortable saying that I think he's one of those kind of players. Chris Bell is tough for me. Let's see where I have him. I've got him as my wide receiver 16. So when he was healthy and he was able to play, he was very dynamic. He's got the size speed thing. He's going to draw a lot of comparisons to Xavier Legette because of that, right? Works best on the horizontal planes, but if you could get him on a deep out or a deep pass, he does have that vertical ability to go up and take the ball out of the air. He's very strong. Got a similar build, very muscular build. There are some people that are very high on Chris Bell. I'm just not sure. To me, it looks very similar to the Xavier Legette experiment of where you have this guy who is athletically overwhelming to a lot of the people that he was up against. In the NFL, that just doesn't seem to be the case, right? When you go against the best of the best, it does level that playing field a teeny tiny bit. And for Bell, I just didn't see a very polished route runner. I'm not sure about how involved he wants to be as a blocker. I do think, though, that as a get the ball in his hands and let him create with an open runway, I think he could do it. Is he super shifty and creative and can, phone booth type moves? I'm not sold on that. I don't think that's necessarily what you would ask a guy with his stature to be. But it is a specific role that a team would have to ask him to be, though, I think. And for the Carolina Panthers, I'm not sure that if they have a similar player and they haven't been able to make that work, I don't think that I would spend much kind of capital on a player like that now. Eric Rivers, JP also brings up, I am higher on Rivers than consensus as well. I have him as my wide receiver 17, so actually one spot behind Chris Bell.
The only thing I would add to Chris Bell is that he suffers from Jonathan Brooks, what do you call it, condition.
Yeah,
and that
syndrome.
He tore his ACL. Yeah, he tore his ACL in November, and so what do we get? He's supposed to be back by training camp. We heard that from Jonathan Brooks. So you want to relive that one more time? I don't know.
And that is, you're right, man. Like we hear, hey, he's progressing. He's going to be back. He's going to be ready to go. Everybody who is dealing with an injury right now, they're all going to be ready to go according to their agents because they don't want to come out before the draft and say, yeah, you may not get much out of him for the first, 3 months of the season, right? Like that's not what you want to say to a team or a prospective employer. So I think that's difficult. Yeah, and I'm with you, JP. Brooks back with a vengeance this year. I'm right there with you.
Don't take this as a slight to Jonathan Brooks or
not
Chris
at all.
Bell. It's more of like we want their availability. Like we like them so much that we want them to be available. But
that's right.
I don't want to bank that they will be back in a certain time frame. And I'd rather assume that they're going to be out for the majority and be pleasantly surprised versus like they should have been back by training camp.
100%, man. I'll bring up these last couple graphics that we had set up for the tight ends just to finish this off. We got about 10 more minutes so we can wrap this thing up.
Okay.
Justin Joly was a guy, or Jolie was a guy that has met with the Carolina Panthers, I believe. Is that a local visit? Does that classify as local?
It does not, unfortunately.
Okay. So that was a top 30.
The top 30. So just to clarify, because people ask these questions. So 3 universities count as local, which is South Carolina, Wake Forest, and Charlotte. And then if you grew up, I forgot what the radius is, like a 90-mile radius from the headquarters, and you're considered local. So he did not grow up in the Charlotte metropolitan area, and he did not attend one of those 3 universities.
Gotcha. That's good information. Thank you for reiterating that. Now, in the pre-combine, I will say that this is one of my bigger movers from combine testing to now. I believe I had him as my tight end 4 before the combine. I have learned, now I was not as high on JT Sanders as many people were his draft season. I think I had him as my tight end 4 actually, which in that class, many thought he was the clear-cut tight end 2, right? I was unsure about how he was as a athlete based on what I saw on film. And then when we got the testing for JT Sanders, that's where I had him lower because it confirmed what I thought I saw. I'm a little bit similar with Jolie as far as the athleticism testing and stuff. This is a converted wide receiver that is playing tight end. He is productive. You can see the numbers there. This past season, he had 49 catches, 489 yards, and 7 touchdowns, only 1 drop. Very sure-handed, strong-handed tight end. 6'3".
Matt Waldman said, sorry to add to you. Matt Waldman said he has the best hands in the class.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I do think that he is that good. Contested catches as well. I mean, this guy is a very strong, sure-handed catcher of the football, and it seems like a pretty natural thing. Obviously, as a former wide receiver, that makes a ton of sense, right? For that transition to be a little bit seamless. As a blocker, I think that he's very willing to get involved. I don't think that he's worried about any of that. Somebody asked him, I forget who it was that was giving a combine interview with him. It was after like the media time, and he was sitting down with them, and they said something to him about like, hey, what kind of blocking are like you going to be best at? Is it inline? Is it move? Like where do you think a team needs to use you? And he's like, look, just ask me to do a certain thing, and I'll work my tail off to be good at it. He does register as that kind of player, but there are physical limitations to that, right? Like, when he packed on a little bit of weight, I thought the athleticism suffered a bit. He had, we talked about how Mekhi Lemon ran the 40, right? And he had this strange like footpath in the way that he ran. I see a similar thing with Jolie as a runner. He's got this like almost jerky gait to it, and it doesn't look super smooth, and the acceleration doesn't look as instant with a little bit of added weight. And I think that at the next level, you're either going to have to ask him again to either maintain the weight that he's at or to shed and be a wildly undersized guy who doesn't necessarily have the functional athleticism. When we talk about his testing scores, right? This guy we didn't get a 40 on him, 30.5-inch vertical. That's fairly low. 9-foot broad. That's fairly low. As far as the shuttle, he had a 4.65. Looking at all of the other tight ends that ran a shuttle drill, whether it was at their pro day or at the combine, 4.65 is the lowest of any of them. And that includes Riley Nowakowski, the fullback / tight end for Indiana, right? It is something to consider. Tight end is one of those positions we have seen a direct correlation with the high RAS guys and the success that they can have at the next level. This guy is not going to come in that department. Now, he does have the experience as a volume receiver, which I value a lot. I need to know that if I am drafting a receiving tight end, that he has the ability and the comfortability to handle that kind of workload instead of just expecting them to take that on Sundays for the first time in their career.
Sounds good.
I had these two guys just because it's my personal thing I wanted to talk about, and I didn't get it, so damn it.
Sorry.
Max Clare is a favorite of mine. I think we've talked about him a handful of times. I don't think that the Carolina Panthers have met with him. I do think that they had representation at the Ohio State Pro Day. So in general, I think that they probably got to get a look at him. This is the guy that I think if you want to bet on, Edgar, why I wanted to talk about him too is because so many people think that Oscar Delp is the guy that you could look at and be like, he's going to be such a better pro than a college player. And you might be completely right about that. But I think that Max Clare, as good as he was at Purdue and as solid as he was at Ohio State, I think he's the guy that I could project and say, I think he's going to be so much better in the NFL. I love his athleticism. I love the ability, and he's not the terrific blocker, but you know what? It's Sam Laporta-esque, right? Where like there are things that he can do really well as a blocker. Maybe it's not as consistent. Is he going to be as good as his partner over here, Will Kazmarek? No. And I'm way higher on Will Kazmarek than most people are. I got him as tight end 5. I did see Brugler has him as like tight end 7 or something. That was pretty cool because all of the little draft simulators that we've looked at for this entire pre-draft period, this guy's down in like the 300s or something like that as the draft. And so when I had him as my tight end 5, I was like, people are going to think that I've, started doing hard drugs. Like it's not just coffee and beer anymore for Ricky. He's on a new thing. But no, I'm a big fan of Kazmarek. He never was a bulk receiving threat, but at Ohio, he did catch over 20 catches and had like, I think 300 or 400 yards receiving, was a little bit more involved in that offense there. Ohio State's just not a great place to go if you want to get shine as a tight end. They ask their tight ends to do different things. And then splitting the stage with Max Clare, I thought that these two, Max Clare and Will Kazmarek, I believe are going to be pretty dang good tight ends. And Kazmarek is a terrific blocker, outstanding blocker. And I think that's where he makes his hay. He's almost like the Jackson Hawes, if you will, of this class, where I think he's got better athleticism and hands that he's giving credit for. So those were two guys that I just wanted to touch on real quick before we wrap this thing up neatly with a bow.
Yeah.
Edgar.
Yeah. As we close, can I play a game with you real quick, Ricky?
Sure, man. I love that.
So, we got a super chat. So let's
hit
pause that.
Love the show, fellas. Think KC might end up being the pick at 19. What do you guys think? Edgar, how would you feel? And what do you... I'm going to make you do something you don't like doing. What's the likelihood of KC Concepcion being a target at 19?
I think the likelihood is high. We're in this final, so we're 10 days away from the draft. Ricky, can you believe it? Got 10 days.
10 days.
And so we're in smokescreen season. So apparently every wide receiver is not going to be available by the time the Panthers pick up 19. But somebody's got to fall, right? And so, gosh, your agenda is Dylan Thieneman, right, Ricky?
That's right.
So my agenda, I would love my big three are like people that would be there at 19. I'm thinking Makai Lemon. I'm thinking Casey Concepcion. I'm thinking Omar Cooper Jr. Like that's for me. Like that would be where I would like to lean towards. Do I love all of these prospects? I want to say like I love them. I wish we could trade. We've talked about this before. Trade down, get some picks, get some more.
Yeah.
Like I don't love them enough that I need to have them at 19. But like the thought of adding that to the offense sounds awesome. Casey, gosh, like I think you just watch his film. He's like he's toasted. I don't want to say toasted, but like he's held his own against the top cornerbacks in college football. And so it's like, why can't you fall in love with that? Like, if he
has toasted some of them, man.
Yeah. And so like any of the best, and then we're talking about the SEC. And so why could it not translate to the NFL? And so I know there's issues about his drops, and that's going to be the number one talk about like, another person who can't catch the ball. But I think that my favorite in the spirit of metaphors, my favorite metaphor is for drops is think of a home run slugger, right? Like you have to get some strikeouts to hit some home runs. And so if Casey Concepcion is, he's ultra, other than that 1 year, NC State has been ultra productive with the drops.
Yeah.
If he can work on the drops, or if he had the drops and he sucked and didn't have any production, then I'm worried about it, but I'm not worried about it. And so the likelihood, gosh, being at 19, I have no idea where the Panthers are going, but if they go wide receiver, I think the likelihood would be high.
And I think it was Josh Norris that spoke about this recently, and it was kind of that compensation. Does he make up for the drops type of deal? And it's your analogy is exactly right. Are you going to get rid of Aaron Judge because he's a 260 average hitter, but he cranks out 60 dingers, right? Like you're not. He's a terrific player, and the threat that he brings to the field. Casey Concepcion would absolutely, and Matt Waldman said this on the show today, would be the most dynamic wide receiver we would have on this team, or offensive skill player that we would have on this team. That is something that you have to have. I think it's interesting that you think that Makai Lemon is possible to be there. And if Makai Lemon would fit what Carolina would want, because he is going to be more of a slot-only type of football player in the NFL, if I had to guess. It will depend on how teams see that too, though. But what he does with the ball after the catch, I think it's tremendous. To answer your question, Ben, thank you, first of all, for the super chat, man, and for watching the show. Really appreciate that. I would not have a problem at all with Casey Concepcion. He's caught fire as of late in the draft circle and in fans. But this is a player that I talked about back in January. And I said, if they're looking at offensive playmakers and they're willing to take another one in the first round, you could do a lot worse than Casey Concepcion. Like, I think that this is a legitimate football player. I like what he brings to this team. The drops, sure, they worry me. I don't want to act like they don't worry me. He had 7 drops this year, 7 drops and 61 receptions. That's not a great rate. And you don't know how much of that is technique, how much of that is just concentration lapses. But either way, you're going to need that to shore up a little bit at the next level, even if he's compensating and giving you the home runs, right? You still don't want a guy who's hitting 200, even if he's hitting 50 home runs, because you're going to have a hard time dealing with that in crucial situations where the likelihood of a mistake is high. But yeah, so I think that he's a player that I would have no problem with Carolina drafting at 19.
Just to gas you up, Ricky, I really think you were the first person that I've seen like kind of mention KC to the Panthers in the first round. Like you were the first one that I saw put it out there.
How about that? Look at that. Gas me up a little bit, Edgar. I like it. All right. JP asked, well, we can end it on this one, Edgar. Okay.
Okay.
Can only pick one in the first. And JP, thank you for super chat. Can only pick one of the first, Edgar. KC, Dylan Thieneman, Jacob Rodriguez.
Mm.
What do you think about Jacob Rodriguez in the first round, Edgar?
I tweeted yesterday. I'm just mentally preparing myself for him to be for the Panthers to take him at 19. I think it didn't do any favors when Luke Kuechly said Jacob Rodriguez is his favorite linebacker. Yeah.
Talk about fanning a fire, right?
Yeah. And so it makes me rethink my process. Is like, I really didn't consider him for a lot of the time because of his size. And so one thing I should clarify between the difference between you and I, Ricky, is that you watch the film, you see all the players, you rank players. I don't watch enough where I can say definitively this person is better than this person. I just, I'll see some highlights, I'll watch some film from some players. And so just as a fan, and somebody tweeted about this, just as a fan, I watch some college football and you hear some names, you see some like people who continuously make plays, you look at the college playoffs. And so like you get this feeling about a player, then you go into draft season, like, oh, this person sucks. So this person's not good. It's like, dude, I just watched the whole season and like thought this guy's amazing. Now he's only a 3rd round pick or he's only a 4th round pick. He's like, what happened? Right. And so there is some sort of a disconnect between what happened during the season. So during the season, I feel like Jacob Rodriguez's hype was so high. And I'd be like, dude, that'd be so cool to have him. He has a mustache. He has a cool name. He has aura, as the kids would say. And so I'm not an experienced enough evaluator where I could say he's worth 19 or not. I just go by, what's the consensus, and consensus is, somewhere in between the two Panthers picks. So it's kind of like, do you want to trade down and get him? Do you want to trade up and get him? Or you want to just secure it and just say like, I'm taking him at 19, but just based on what I know, his size and the consensus rankings, 19 would be a little rich. But then if they have that much conviction that he's going to be that guy, and I remember something you said too, Ricky, you said, I feel more comfortable with Jacob Rodriguez if they sign Devin Lloyd.
100%.
They signed Devin Lloyd. And so thinking about Jacob Rodriguez in the vacuum is like, oh, kind of nervous. But like the pairing of Devin Lloyd and Jacob Rodriguez and what that could do for their nickel, for their pass defense is like, oh, like we're cooking with gas here. And so I see the potential, but I don't know. I'm not the type of guy that would tell you if it's worth a 19.
Yeah, I've got people think I hate Jacob Rodriguez. They think I hate Jacob Rodriguez. They think I hate Anthony Hill.
That's Curtis. That's Curtis. So
yeah,
because he's listening, you should tell it's Curtis who thinks you hate Jacob Rodriguez.
Curtis thinks I hate Jacob Rodriguez because I said that for me, my evaluation on Jacob Rodriguez, and look, I'm working really hard on getting my evals all formatted next week. Maybe I'll go ahead and I'll release the Jacob page or something today after the show. Maybe I could do that and
wow, look at you.
Fires. But so Jacob Rodriguez ended up my linebacker 5 in this class with a 2nd round grade. That is not hating a guy, right? Like it's not. But the thing is, when the guy is as decorated, and I will give you a slight preview here, right? We talk about analogies and all that kind of stuff. When we talk about these players. And I have the opening line from my profile for Jacob Rodriguez is as highly decorated as a sorority brunch party in Charleston, South Carolina. Because he is the winner of the Butkus Award, the Bednarik Award, the Bronco Nagurski Trophy, and the Lombardi Award, right? This guy is absolutely phenomenal when it comes to accolades and awards. But he is undersized. I know people will say, well, what about the height and weight? It's not that much different. No. His arm length is short. His wingspan, his frame is small. And he plays to avoid contact, I believe. And that's from a self-awareness. It's not because he's scared. He's not scared, but he knows that contact is not his best friend. He does not initiate a ton of collision. He does not want to have to sift through congestion. And I think that at the NFL level, I think the teams are going to know that as well, and that they are going to force that issue. So how does that get mitigated at the next level? Having a guy like Devin Lloyd, as you just mentioned, Edgar, is a really good pairing for him because that is a player that can help alleviate a little bit of that, insulate a little bit of those things. So I do like him. He's a good football player. For me, in this question, JP, it's Thieneman. And Thieneman, to me, is the only one that I have a first-round grade of those 3. Casey, I have a second-round grade. Rodriguez, second-round grade. Thieneman, for one last tease before we get out of here. On my big board, I have Dylan Thieneman as my 8th overall player. Much higher than consensus.
To be on the record, I would say I would pick Thieneman. I don't think the Panthers would. And this is just me just trying to predict what they would do. I would think they would have KC. or I would think of Casey Concepcion. I would pick Dylan Thune also.
Look at us. We see.
Look at us.
All right, Edgar, you did such a great job bringing us into this show, and I know you got to run.
Yeah.
Take us out of this thing. And
Yeah.
for everyone listening, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. The super chats, thank you very much. Questions to Matt Waldman and to Matt Waldman. Thank you very much for him being here today. That was awesome. I look forward to this every year, Edgar. It is my favorite thing that we have ever done together was these episodes with Matt. I think I learn every single time, and he's just a good dude. So awesome today.
To make a 90s metaphor, this is like your Christmas vacation of episodes.
100%. I would watch this episode every day for a month and a half.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone who's being here. We've got over 600 people who joined us this morning, this afternoon, wherever you're watching or listening. We are very appreciative. Coming up, just we got to tease something for the future too, Ricky. So we've got we got a Carolina draft guide that's on its way. We got a draft in 10 days. We're possibly line up something live, right, Ricky? Maybe we'll do something.
Oh, we're gonna do it live on the first round Thursday night for the draft. We 100% will be doing live reactions. We got the 19th pick this year, Edgar, too. So we get to hang out and watch the draft unfold instead of just having our pick and then having to talk about other teams for the rest of the night. We get to watch players drop. We get to give analysis. We'll have the draft guide loaded up that we can sit there, read about the players that are taken, see how it affects our strategy. I'm amped up about that one, to be honest.
My favorite part about last year was you not knowing who was drafted and then kind of seeing what you thought on like live, like opening a present.
Because I couldn't keep up with what was going on.
I know. So it was like, hey, Ricky, this is going to happen.
It was great.
The only thing is crazy, even though they're picking 19, I don't know if people know this, but they actually reduced the time between picks. So it's now 8 minutes instead of 10 minutes. So even though it's 19, it's going to be fast and furious when we're talking about draft night.
We won't necessarily be on until 11 o'clock waiting on our draft pick. We'll just be on until 10:30 waiting on our draft pick.
Anything else we're looking for that the fans should look forward to, Ricky, before we close?
I think that's pretty much it. Panthers on tap. My guys will be on. I think that we're off this week. Or am I just off this week? I think it's just me. I'm trying to get the draft guide stuff wrapped up. I'm out of town again on Friday and Saturday. So I didn't plan my out of town stuff super well this year.
No, you did.
Multiple trips right at the crucifix of draft period. But I believe Bryson and Curtis, I think, will be on Wednesday night, Panthers on tap. We will have, again, the live draft episode for us. And that is, I think, all that I have up until the draft.
All right. Well, with 10 days left in the draft, Ricky, Curtis, Bryson, myself, we've got you covered for all your Panthers and draft needs. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for welcoming Matt. Hope you learned something new. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you're getting excited and amped for the draft as we are. But until next time, I'm Edgar. That's Ricky Rains, and we'll see y'all next time.